Right, here we are. Arjuna Uvacha Evam Satata Yukta Ye Bhaktastvam Paryupasate Ye Chapyaksharam Avyaktam Tesham Ke Yogavittama Ye Chapyaksharam Avyaktam Tesham Ke Yogavittama Evam Satata Yukta Ye Bhaktastvam Paryupasate Ye cha api aksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamah. So again, he comes to the same question which he was raising several times on sannyasa and yoga. You remember in the karma yoga section. Here he starts asking about the bhaktas and those who are following sannyasa basically. Aksharam, avyaktam. Aksharam indestructible, avyaktam something which is not manifested. So the transcendental. So Arjuna said, those devotees, bhaktah, who thus by constant union seek after thee, evam satata yuktaye, who are yuktas, satata, constantly united, with you, as it were, not with you, but with the idea to find you, let us say, loving you, constantly have that yoking towards you. Tvam paryupasate, worshipping you. Yecha, or those, api, also, aksharam avyaktam, indestructible, unmanifest, transcendental, tesham ke, of those two types, ke, who, yoga vittamah, who are the best in yoga. Either those who follow the avyakta, the transcendental, or those who worship you here with love. And you can anticipate the answer, of course, already knowing Sri Aurobindo and integral yoga, we know that the answer will be for bhaktas. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, but it will be more complex and beautiful. Maya veshyamano ye mam nitya yukta upasate shraddhaya parayopetah te me yuktatama matah. So, Mai Aveshya, who established unto me, Manach, the mind, Ye Mam, or those who Nitya Yuktaha, constantly united or yoked or composed. Let us use another word, composed constantly. Upasate, worship me. Worship is a wrong word for upasana. Upasate is literally approaching or sitting close to, being close to me. Yeah. So we translate it as worship or praise, but it is not really so. It is those who are constantly approaching the divine, constantly looking for proximity towards the divine, who want to be near, who want to be close to the divine. Not those who want to receive some gifts from the divine and go their own way, egoistic way to live, but those who want the divine nearby, who are in love, so to say. There are many people in ashram who are bhaktas of this kind, yeah? Who want the mother, who want to be near her in their thoughts, in their feelings, in their physical body. They long towards her. Narad is one of those, yeah, who wants to be closer to the ashram because mother was there. This is upasate, to be longing constantly, to be wanting to approach, to be near. And Sri Aurobindo will speak on this. Samipya, this is a misprint here. Shraddhaya paraya upetach, and they are charged with the supreme shraddha, with the supreme faith. Teme yuktatamah matach, They are for me the greatest yogis. Those who gave to me their mind, who are constantly composed, constantly seeking the proximity with me or to me, and who are um, charged with the supreme Shraddha, faith, they are the best yogins, I think, says Krishna. Sri Aurobindo translation is here. The Blessed Lord said, those who found their mind in me, he put it even better, those who found their mind in me, and by constant union, possessed of a supreme faith, seek after me, I hold to be the most perfectly in union of yoga. There is a passage here which is quite significant. The question raised here by Arjuna points to the difference between the current Vedantic view of liberation and the view propounded in the Gita. The orthodox yoga of knowledge aims at the fathomless emergence in the one infinite existence, Sayujya. Sayujya is this yoking oneself, being united with, being connected. That's what it is. Receive the impact. It looks upon that alone as the entire liberation, Sayujya. The yoga of adoration, or bhakti yoga, envisages an eternal habitation on nearness as the greater release, salokya or samipya. This is a misprint. It should be samipya, the proximity, closeness. The yoga of works leads to oneness in power of being in nature, sadrishya. Sadrishya is kind of similarity or resemblance of some kind. So we have sayujya, the connection, connectivity. We have samipya, the proximity, the nearness. Salokya, sharing the same world, sharing the same space, that is bhakti. And sadrishya, the resemblance from karma yoga. So karma yoga is the farthest. It resembles the divine. Sayujya is already yoking oneself with the divine. Salokya, sharing the same space with the divine. These are famous terms Sri Aurobindo uses here and there. You can find them he's using them in the Life Divine, in the Synthesis, these very terms. But the Gita envelopes them all in the Catholic integrality and fuses them all into one greatest and richest divine freedom and perfection. Arjuna has been enjoined first to sink his separate personality in the calm impersonality of the one eternal and immutable self, a teaching which agreed well with his previous notions and offered no difficulties. But now he is confronted with the vision of this greatest transcendent, this widest universal Godhead, and commanded to seek oneness with him by knowledge and works and adoration. He is asked to unite himself in all his being, satata yukta, satata totally united, totally composed with the Godhead, referred to by the word tvam. Is it really this? Wait a minute, I will check because there's so many misprints. We don't have this passage here. Okay. Manifest in the universe, seated as the Lord of works in the world and in our hearts by his mighty world yoga. But what then of this immutable who never manifests, Aksharam, Avyaktam, there are so many misprints, never puts on any form, stands back and apart, transcendental? What about it? And he will continue, quite interesting about it. Sri Aurobindo continues. Let me finish his passage. Never puts on any form, stands back and apart from all action, enters into no relation with the universe or with anything in it, is eternally silent and one, and impersonal and immobile. What about him? This eternal self is the greater principle according to all current notions, and the Godhead in the manifestation is an inferior figure. The unmanifest and not the manifest is the eternal spirit. How then does the union which admits the manifestation, admits the lesser thing, come yet to be the greater yoga knowledge? It's Sri Aurobindo's, way of making everything very obvious, to stand out clearly. How come that this lesser yoga becomes greater yoga, then that greater unmanifest spirit becomes lesser achievement than realization in manifestation? And as we sense, it is a major topic of integral yoga. So we continue the answer of Sri Krishna. Ye tu aksharam anirdeshyam, yet vaksharam anirdeshyam avyaktam paryupasate, sarvatragata chintyam cha, kutastham achalam dhruvam, samniyam yendriya gramam, sarvatra samabuddhaya. Te prapnuvanti mam eva sarvabhuta hite ratah. It's very similar to the answer he gave before in the Sankhya Yoga in the second chapter, to the same question, similar question. But those who worship or who seek the proximity to the unmanifest and invisible and indestructible, to nirvana, let us say, to the silent Brahman, unmanifest Brahman, spirit, transcendental. Sarvatragama chintyamcha, to the one whose thought is pervading everywhere, or is present everywhere, not thought, but consciousness of which is unthinkable, let us say, who is present everywhere and unthinkable. Kutastham, standing at the top of the manifestation. Achalam, immobile. Dhruvam, steady. Samniyamya, indriya gramam, having controlled the whole bunch of indriyas, senses. Sarvatra samabuddhayah, everywhere with the same buddhi, with the same mind. Te prapnuvanti, they achieve mam, me, eva, only. Sarvabhuta hiteratah, happy with all the beings. And there is something which is contradictory to the mind, but not to the experience. If we could really become equal in our mind and control our senses and seek the manifestation of the unmanifest, we will arrive at realization of Shri Krishna anyhow, of Purushottama. Because we will cleanse up all the claims of our nature over our consciousness, and then it will shine and it will reveal the divine anyhow. So in the experience, there is no contradiction. But in the mind, yes, there is. Yeah?
Vladimir?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Why are we? Oh,
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's. Is it okay? Okay. Let's see. I find the passage very clear, but I find the commentaries, including in the Integral Yoga,
Yeah.
profoundly perplexing. So I find on the one hand, you have the knowledge people who say, "Oh, that devotion, that's just he's just being nice to Arjuna. It's really all about the Supreme Self." And the devotion people say it has nothing to do with that. It's actually the figure of Krishna or the figure of the mother. It's not okay. So so Sri Aurobindo says very clearly here, on the one hand, there's a transcendent, unmanifest spirit, and he says he's at the same time the living supreme soul of all things. So it seems to me, my understanding is that in the devotion, it's not saying that you can't reach that through worshiping a visible figure. But it seems to me, just like it was in the whole first 6 chapters, in this chapter, he's saying that the discipline still is to recognize the presence of this all pervading divine reality, which is not beyond manifestation. We can approach it by love and devotion. But it seems to me to oversimplify it to say, well, no, he's just saying, worship the figure of the mother or Krishna. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, well, this is the dilemma of our choosing the path by the mind. Mind has to choose what is better for the mind. Actually, I'm sorry to speak like this, but I think like this. Mind is choosing what is better for it. Yeah. Because mind has to join the movement, so it has to do the work, major work, and it has to join either this which is more transcendental spirit and thinking of the unthinkable, or it has to worship. And not everybody is for worshiping, and not I'm more, for example, for finding the truth as it is. So to say, in my nature, so to say, I would be more inclined to this path, to this which is described here, which is more difficult, and less worshipping path. Yeah? Worshipping path to me looks inferior to my mind, I mean to say. My mind chose to see this path of the truth and finding the spirit unmanifest as the much higher and much truer aim in life than just going and worshiping some idols or believing in something you do not know what it is, or making pranams and by that feeling good. It's not enough for me. It's not convincing, so to say, from the beginning. But now I'm slowly growing into this triple path of the Gita, and I find the meaning in the Shraddha more and more. And this is the psychic path, which I was always lacking from the beginning. I was more of that spiritual path. And the psychic heart path was always kind of lagging behind or something, if you will. I'm speaking about the mind, the choice of the mind, and that is here the answer. He says that both lead to me, but but the choice will be yours. Yeah. And what is he is asking? What would be better choice? And he gave him a very direct answer here. The one who puts all the mind into me, who is constantly united and seeking proximity with me, with supreme faith, yeah, he is the best, I think, in yoga.
Can
This
I
is
just
the first answer.
I'm sorry, I just ask a follow-up. I don't see, I've never understood why there seems to be some opposition because if there is something in you drawn to the infinite silence beyond and simultaneously drawn to a sense of a living, dynamic presence everywhere, why not enjoy both?
Yeah, I fully agree with you from the integral point of view.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
You have to grow to that level to see that both are leading to the same experience, and cleansing of the impressions of chitta is as needed as he spoke about sannyasa and yoga before, no? So without sannyasa you cannot come to yoga, and without yoga you cannot reach the sannyasa level. So here, the same story from the practical point of view of yoga, both are needed and both are there. But from the mind point of view, what to choose, whether to worship the divine Nirguna Brahman or Saguna, whether to go to the church or to the temple and put some incense sticks and flowers and stand in front of the idol and feel the presence and love towards the divine, or to like Kabir or Mirabai, seeing everywhere the divine in every cloud, in every movement, like Sri Aurobindo did in the Alipur jail, of this kind. This experience is rather rare, and and I think it requires preparation. It cannot be faked or imitated by the vital, because this imitation by the vital leads nowhere. Yeah? It will be just self-exaggeration of. That's why I didn't trust this path until the divine is open to you. You cannot love some image of the divine. Yeah? You have to have some experience of the divine to love it or him. And with knowledge, with Sri Aurobindo and the mother, the knowledge grows, and it generates this love within you towards this knowledge, towards the truth. And that is bhakti in my way. Yeah? But again, it's a very, very subjective thing. I may be not answering your question at all.
No, it's perfect. Thank you. It was very clear. Yeah.
And I'm not supposed to answer. We are supposed to kind of to
Yeah.
share what we think about it. I'm
You know,
just in the position of the text reader, so
yeah.
don't take me
I
anything.
think what fascinates me the most about what you said, and I bet everyone here has had some degree of this same mixture, that I find my original orientation 50 years ago was completely from the psychic. And my mind always fought it. You know, I was always afraid that Vital was faking it. Exactly. But I had to learn to trust. I love the knowledge path. I love Shankar. I love all that. But I read Ramakrishna and said, oh, I love this so much. I was completely in love. For a few months, I was reading Ramakrishna and just in bliss. This is in 73. So I've known always, and I love all the Christian mystics too, and especially the Orthodox, the Russian and Greek. But so I've known, so I wonder for other people, I'd love to hear when I read it in the Gita as if this is before I heard of Sri Aurobindo, as if it's a difference. It's like, no, but I love the moments of utter silence and transcendence, and I love feeling. I don't think it's a entirely a self-deception. It's just, I would trust if anyone here who says they've had moments where they feel something of Mother's presence in the trees and the clouds. It may not be the vision in the Alipore jail. I would trust that everyone here knows that. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. It may not be the complete, dynamic vision, but you have a psychic intimation. So to me, it's like I go through the Gita, and it's like, well, I guess there's a reason why Krishna's making it seem so oppositional. And I read Sri Aurobindo, and he says, well, this transcendent spirit and the supreme soul of all things. I like that. That's my sense.
Yeah. You are more psychic from the beginning, yes. So interesting. Yeah. They are both there, but it's a preference of the path. Sri Aurobindo didn't start with the psychic, he started with something above the head, and all his yoga is from that, coming down. And then when mother arrived, he started his intense psychic yoga. And that was total change in his approach to yoga, by the way, with the mother arrival. So, yeah, everybody has his own path to this unity, to this oneness. Yeah.
Hello, Vladimir.
Yes.
Hi, it's good to be back in the group.
Yes. Yeah.
It's good to
Very
see you.
welcome.
I'm a longtime practitioner, especially lately, of Guru Bhav, of open-eyed meditation, where I'm doing my practice, staring at photos of my lineage. And you mentioned the word steadiness, and I think it has always offered me a steadiness that maybe I've lacked somewhere else, but I've always been drawn to that, and lately have been doing it with more discipline, more regularity, and it's been beautiful. It does seem to build on itself. I would say that. My ops, what it's like there was one question, and I guess I'll be quiet. As my experiences of the Guru Bhav or Lakshmi Bhav, or the devotional practice, which is kind of what I've cultivated. I can close my eyes and go be drawn into meditation, and then I'm being pulled, more towards a shunya state on a good day. But then I was in correspondence with a Swami a number of years ago whose practice was witness consciousness. And through the grace of that correspondence, I was on the beach in Acapulco, Mexico, and was brought into a totally different state in which the whole idea of me just seemed comical. It was not a bhakti state. It was a timeless, eternal. There was no, I'll never forget it, and I've yet to really repeat it. So it's just interesting how these maybe flavors of transcendence kind of combine. But for me right now, my practice is the bhakti yoga and open-eyed meditation, Guru Bhav, and carrying that into the day in the morning. So I love this chapter, and thank you for leading it off. It's good, so good to be here. See everybody.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Well, everybody has his own way to come to. And I remember the beginning of my path, it was a little faking. Yeah, kind of something mind had to, I had to repeat the words which I didn't understand. And with the repetition of those words, they were kind of growing more and more familiar and bringing some power slowly. Something becomes over years with reading and more diving into it. Everything was attracting. The word yoga was attracting, India, all these, words, they were attractive to something in you. Why should I go that route in my life? Yeah. Go somewhere, study Sanskrit, and then live in India. What is this all about? From communist family, have nothing to do with this altogether. But something in me kind of cognized that it was meaningful. I do not know how, because it wasn't really meaningful to the mind. So, there was something else, definitely. I just can't speak about this because it's not fair to speak about that thing. About the mind, I can speak. Yes, my mind was this, that, and still is here. This monkey mind is here jumping and trying to make sense out of things. Of course, I deal with him many years and learn to kind of manage it to a certain extent. But still, it is here. This is the preference of the mind, where we are going to Nirguna Brahman, Nirvana, or we are going to manifestation of the divine. In brief, manifestation is bhakti, is to see the divine in nature, as Vibhuti Yoga was giving us, to see it in everything, in the flame, in the sunrise, in the wind, in the ocean, in relations between people, to enjoy his presence everywhere. This is bhakti. Or to remove all that as some kind of maya, and to find that pure truth, unborn self, beyond time and space, something which is there. And so these are quite significantly different paths for the mind. But for the realization at the end, even for the realization, Sri Aurobindo describes this he says that he met Yogi in Himalayas in his letters on yoga, where he told him that he burned all the bridges. He changed because he considered this world to be the creation by Maya. And so he destroyed all the connections and could not now, being liberated, could not come back to life. There was no means for him to come back. He was cut off. It reminds me a little bit of Ramana Maharshi in that state, cut off from life to the extent that there's no link to the body. Somebody came to him and said, you know, Sri Aurobindo says that we have to conquer the disease and death in the body. He says, body is the disease. So he was cut off to that extent that for him, body was the disease. Yeah, it was a mistake. So he was so much in the spirit, in that transcendental spirit, that coming back was no option for him whatsoever. He was there just wearing out his time and bringing the presence of the spirit to others, and people could feel it. Somebody, it was not Carney who was mentioning this before, that he meant with, I think it was this Malini, this great dancer, and he had an interview with her, and she said, you know, they asked her, what do you want most in this life to achieve? She says, I want to achieve nirvana, to be never born again. I said, why? You are the dancer. You are the most magnificent being, and you want not to be born again? What's the point? And this is exactly that difference between these two paths. Yeah? One is to be never born, to have nothing to do with this disease body and so on, death, old age, suffering, and finding only the truth in which we can dissolve. And Shri Krishna says, if you go that route, you will come to me anyhow. If you can go that way, at the end. Or you, easier path, you love me in everything. Give your mind to me, seek me, proximity to me, and with supreme Shraddha, you will be the best in yoga. Shraddha is needed, yeah?
So you think that Ramakrishna is a good example of why, not Ramakrishna, I mean Sri Ramana Maharshi, is a good example of why Sri Aurobindo felt that there's a danger in the denial of the ascetic, that although you may achieve liberation yourself, you're not realizing the fullness of the integral yoga. It's primarily a path of knowledge without the bhakti and karma yoga and the integration of the three, and is leaving behind the transformation of the physical, which is necessary for the complete fulfillment of the purpose of creation.
Yeah, it's very nice that you mentioned this triple path, because in my kind of explanation, I lost the track of it. When Shri Krishna says, if you do this yoga of transcendental finding, you will come to me, he means in the setting of integral yoga. He doesn't mean in the out of this setting. Yeah? He means in this triple path, in the Purna yoga, yes, you will come to me. But if you are worshipping the transcendental divine, like this lady seeking of nirvana and wants to be never born again, to be dissolved like that yogi in the Himalayas, to be dissolved and has no bridge, has no chance to come back in this life at least, maybe in the next, not in this. This is something, yes, it's a big question. And that is the same Ramakrishna addressed, as you remember, Ishvara Koti and Jivan Koti. Yes, two types of souls, those who seek only liberation for themselves and those who seek the liberation for the divine in nature. And so Ishvara Koti are those who are being liberated, come back to work till the end, till the end of the manifestation of the divine. They want to work for the divine here in this world. They want to see the divine in this world. And this is something mentioned by many, actually. And here, this is a very valid question by Arjuna. What route to take? Should I go to this transcendental, or should I, who is better? Because he saw too many of them already there who were going into the transcendental, to samadhi, disappear in some meditation which has very little to do with this life, staying for days and weeks in a deep meditation, transcendental, coming back completely free from any care, from ego, from this, from that, from fear. And that is a very attractive proposition in a way.
Yes,
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead, Doug.
No.
yeah, go ahead, Don.
No. Martha.
All right, thanks. It is very attractive. It's very appealing for sure. But there are souls that are naturally helper souls. I think that's a fact and recognized. And these helper souls, these beings who have that urge to help, are compelled to participate in the transformation of matter, and to see it all through to the end.
Ishvara Kotis, yes. And when he spoke about this to his disciples, they all jumped and said, we are all Ishvara Kotis. I mean, everybody wanted to work for the divine for some reason, though the ideal was, the Advaitic ideal is to leave this world as illusion and disappear somewhere in Brahman there, to dissolve oneself and to have nothing to do with the individuality anymore. And somebody asked Sri Aurobindo the same question, whether it is a final liberation when we are dissolved in the Brahman, like salt in the water, using Shankaracharya's, ideal. So it's like salt in the water, you dissolve, and then there is no salt. It's only salty water. So, and Sri Aurobindo says, I doubt it. I doubt that there is a final liberation because, and the answer is magnificent, because we all committed to actually manifest the divine as soul, group soul. So when we are liberated there, we think we are free, then we will be sent again to do the work because we agreed to do it. So we will come back and start again.
There's a passage from the mother I have always found it really, really helpful and clarifying, where she speaks of three paths. So the first, as we've been saying, is the transcendent. And for me personally, for decades, I'd be reading Sri Aurobindo and about planes and parts of being and triple transformation, aspiration, Jason, all this stuff, and then go to Maharshi and just say, who am I? It's so simple, just that simple transcendence, right? She says the second path is the one where you perceive the divine everywhere. It's not evolutionary. And to me, I find that embodied In Tibetan Buddhism, they have a saying, all sounds are mantra, all sights are mandala. So I mean, everything becomes divine seeing, divine hearing, much like the faculties of conscious, but it's not an evolutionary path. And she says that's wonderful too. It's more the tantric. It's like seeing the divine woven everywhere. And the third path, which is I think is not in the Gita or only hinted at in the Gita, is the one of the evolutionary path, where you're not only you have the transcendent, you have the manifest divine, and you have this evolutionary path of the psychic being. So to me, that's the completion.
Mm. So I was thinking about this also, about the Gita, why it is Purna Yoga, what it has to do with synthesis is built on the Gita totally. And, you know, what Sri Aurobindo adds, the yoga of self-perfection, is only the yoga which is kind of taking these triple paths and starts applying it. Yeah. So basically there is not much of change in the material, you know, in the stuff, in the what is to be done. It's all in the Gita. And I was thinking, where is that evolution in the Gita? And I think it is in this bhakti, in finding the divine every day, every moment, everywhere. And once it is being found, or as Sri Aurobindo says, salokyam, so coming, sharing the same space with the divine, sharing the same world with the divine, yeah, then it builds up the evolution. That is, because it is in time and space. So since we are living in time and space every day, we have to find the divine and share with him this world. It would be evolutionary just by default. This is just my thinking where that evolution is hiding in this kind of Gita's setting, because nobody speaks here about evolution. Evolutionary topic is more kind of modern topic. It's closer to us. Yeah. So it evolved in the last few centuries, and this idea of evolution. But it was there in the Veda. If we look into the Rig Veda, and those who study the Rig Veda with me in this Hymns to the Mystic Fire, it's constantly there. Each hymn speaks about this constant journey, yeah, battlefield journey. The man is described as ever advancing pilgrim, never stopping moving forward. On the height he stood that looked upon greater heights. There's always somewhere to go, something higher to achieve. So these are the visions of the Veda, which were later kind of, the whole topic disappeared. There was no more evolution. And then it came back with Sri Aurobindo again. But if we look closer to the Gita, we will see that bhakti, and especially that Vibhuti yoga, to see the divine in all elements, in all events, is actually that very drive to evolution.
And loka sangraha, the holding together of the worlds, to act for that.
Yes, absolutely. Also, even on the structural level, one has to understand what is required for the world, and maybe maybe it's not even the highest truth, but you have to take it because it is a step towards something higher. You have to recognize that this is needed now, and not the highest, because the highest can be destructive for the world, because the world is not ready for it yet. So it's a very interesting vision. Sri Aurobindo brings us thoughts which are far superior to, so kind of synthesizing all energies and all the paths and all the elements of our being into one.
Yes, Sri Aurobindo's commentary on the Gita makes that synthesis tremendously clear. And there is also a tradition of interpreting the Gita in terms of the 3/3 of the Gita, the first 6 chapters for karma yoga, the next 6 for bhakti, and the last 6 for
Jnana.
jnana. But that threefold division and the union of those 3, to me, that's novel in Sri Aurobindo's interpretation, which is missing from other interpretations. I'm not familiar with many other interpretations, but I've studied the Gita on and off for 50 years, but it's completely novel how he not only accepts all 3, but insists on their integration and the complete fulfillment of each one. It may start with one or the other, but eventually they all have to come to fulfillment for the full realization of the human potential. So it's like the Gita. I don't know if you agree, but how about, is Sri Aurobindo the first one who emphasizes the fulfillment of all 3 paths and the union of those 3 for that full state of man maya mama pashritaha,
Yeah.
the
You're right,
union of 3.
absolutely. You will not find such interpretation in the Tilak or Gandhi. They will be taking these verses, or Shankaracharya. You will find them in a totally different setting, yeah, as something which is pointing out to the realization of the divine, beyond Maya, being unborn, being mukta. All is kind of interpreted in the terms of mukti, liberation,
Yeah.
liberation from the body, from this kind of,
And when you read the Gita, you can see how people have fallen into this idea that it's all
so
about
easy.
mukti. Yeah, it talks about the mukti is the parayana, the highest. But it's not the highest. It's the highest for those particular people, but not in general. That's not the main message of the Gita, but it has taken by many, the Gita has been misinterpreted, just like Gandhi misinterpreted the Gita in terms of nonviolence, which is, Sri Aurobindo makes it very clear that there's a total distortion of the Gita, because Krishna is pounding in his insistence on going out to fight for Arjuna.
The misunderstanding goes so deep about
Yeah.
these three parts that there are even Indologists who interpret the bhakti yoga as inferior to jnana yoga because it is the second path. So the first part is karma, then bhakti, then jnana. Jnana must be the highest. And bhakti is kind of semi-knowledge. They speak about it as if kind of, knowledge which is not reaching to its highest yet.
Yeah.
But in jnana yoga, we find liberation. But this was on the way just to tune the feelings and emotions. That's how they interpret. Can you
Right.
imagine
And
how
even
far it is from the truth?
even professional Indologists. So, but it seems to me that all 3 paths involve non-attachment, and they're all subject to dangers of different types of attachment. For example, the bhakti path. I was listening to a talk this morning by Shraddhalu. He mentions how Dilip Kumar Roy, who was the great devotee of Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo wrote
Dilip Kumar Roy, you mean?
Yeah, 3,000 or 4,000 letters to him, and not only many short letters, but also the longest letters. He was always trying to help Dilip Kumar Roy out of this kind of fixation he had on Krishna. He loved singing about Krishna, and he did it fantastically. But when Sri Aurobindo left his body, Roy actually left the ashram and started his own ashram. And, Shradhalu's message was that he was attached, to that idea of Krishna as he visualized him. And he was not open to a spontaneous vision. And in spite of all that Sri Aurobindo did to help him have that naturally. And Dilip Kumar Roy said, well, why don't you just give me the vision of your universal, the universal Krishna, just like in the Gita. And apparently,
It was quite ironic with Dilip Kumar Roy, who was close to Sri Aurobindo,
yeah,
whom Krishna was embodied. He
yeah,
was seeking for some Krishna somewhere, and Sri Aurobindo was longing to him and, loving him dearly, writing such love letters he never wrote to anyone. To this Dilip, he was kind of nurturing him, and it's weird that once he left his body, he could not stay with the mother. He had to live with his Mataji. We have his ashram in Pune. I visited his ashram actually, and I met with this Mataji, his consort. Yeah, she was always going into samadhi. She was a very great singer, by the way, as he was, and she was singing all her bhajans, beautiful singing. And then she was falling into this samadhi, like for hours, like whook, and silence, as frozen. And we all sit there for hours, with her being in samadhi. So, so what?
yeah. And Mother spent several hours with him one afternoon, helping to pull out the psychic being in his chest. So
Oh, you're talking about
with Dilip Kumar Roy.
it is with Amal Kiran. Yeah?
Oh, I'm sorry. I confused the two. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry then.
No big. But yes, the Dilip was so loud, and Mother took care of him so much because of that, because of Sri
Yeah.
Aurobindo's attachment to him.
Yeah.
But you see, this is also an interesting story to look into. So we would never understand this, why it was. But here is the answer. The answer is what is better, who is better. He already said it in the first, and now he will say something additional at which we will stop, and it will be a good answer for us. Klesho dhikara dhikatara stesham kleshach adhikara stesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukham deha vadbhich avapyate. So klesha is difficulty, adhikara is bigger difficulty of those tesham avyakta sakta chetasam, whose chetas, whose consciousness is attached to the transcendental. The path is difficult, whose consciousness is attached to the transcendental. For them it is more difficult. Yeah? Avyaktahi gatich dukham, avyakta, unmanifest indeed, gatich, aim or path. Dukham deha vadbhiha vapyate. It is achieved with difficulty by those who have the body. Deha vadbhiha. So by the embodied beings to achieve something which is not embodied is quite difficult. Simple answer. I find it so amazing. Those who are embodied, we are already in the nature. So why to seek something beyond nature? If the divine is already here in all forms, is it not easier to find him here and to look for him here? Yetu sarvani karmani mai samnyasya matparach Ananyenaiva yogena mam dhyayantah upasate. Tesham aham samudharta mrityu sansara sagarat. Bhavami nachirat partha maya veshita chetasam. Mayi aveshita chetasam, if he splits on. Yetu sarvani karmani, but those who do all the works, mayi sanyasya, putting onto me or into me all the activities, matparach, seeking only me as their highest goal. Ananyena iva yogena, and not other yoga. There is no other aim in life, only the divine, as Sri Aurobindo says for the integral yoga. There must be only the divine aim, yes? If there is another aim, this success in this yoga becomes impossible. So with one aim only, mam dhyayantah, thinking, meditating, contemplating upon me, upasate, approaching me, coming closer to me every time. Tesham aham samudharta, of them I am the savior. Mrityu sansara sagarat, from the ocean of sansara and death. Now he's using this word sansara, which is in the setting of this thinking to go beyond. Bhavami, I will become the savior for them from the ocean of sansara and death. Nachirat, not for long, very fast I will become the savior. Mayi aveshita chetasam, of those whose mind or whose consciousness is located onto me or fixed upon me. So this is his answer. And that also, quite interestingly, Sri Aurobindo changed his yoga also when the mother arrived, and he made this psychic as the major preference in his yoga. It's amazing. Yeah? Though there are other paths. For example, Pavitra went through his path of the descent from above and finally discovering the psychic at the end. As Sri Aurobindo did, he went his route. But still, Sri Aurobindo made a preference for psychic as the major discovery, as more important than any other. Great. So we can stop here. It's a wonderful discussion. Thank you for sharing all your thoughts and deeper thoughts, and it was wonderful. If somebody wants to say something also, please go ahead. I will stop here. I will stop sharing. Yeah. Jaya Shri, Gita Shri. I know it's like at the end. Would you like to share something at the end after everything is what was said? Yes, what is else to say? But in case there's some idea, some glimpse which was waiting to be shared, and you can draw it and you can bring it forward to this.
Thank you, but I think it was beautiful. Everything that everybody said.
Yes,
Think
it was
about.
very beautiful. So the bhakti is basically the psychic being.
Yes. Yes, it is this here heart.
But at the same time, there's a distinction between the heart center and the psychic being. And Shraddha says even when, some
Yeah,
people feel
definitely.
blocks in the heart center can make it difficult for people to get to the psychic being behind it. So Shraddha actually recommends going up a couple inches above the heart, then back behind it and down to reach the psychic. That's just it just emphasized this to me, the difference between the heart chakra and the psychic being.
Yeah,
which are
we are
close.
not, we are not going into the distinction between the vital
Yeah.
center, between the desire soul, between that deepest
Right.
center behind the desire soul. Yes, this is all the integral yoga, all the nitty-gritties, all the varieties of knowledge which can be. And when Sri Aurobindo speaks about the heart center, he means actually the deeper center. He never
Mm.
means that vital center, heart center. And the opposition, or what do you call it, the contradiction of our psychology. It's very interesting for psychologists and maybe for Don also, that the difference between the mind and the heart, that mind and heart do not go together.
Mhm.
The jnana yoga and bhakti yoga somehow have a problem. And he addresses this issue of the difference. The heart can love um, regardless to whether it is something perfect or not.
Mhm.
It knows that there is truth behind. It doesn't need truth to be totally manifested. Yeah, it can sense it. Yeah.
I guess there's time. I was thinking this before. I thought it might be worth mentioning. Dalit Kumar Roy came to Sri Aurobindo through Krishna Prem. Krishna Prem once mentioned that Essays in the Gita was the best commentary he'd ever read, and that was it. And Krishna Prem, back when I was struggling between Bhakti and Jnana, I always found I trusted Krishna Prem before Sri Aurobindo. If people don't know, Krishna Prem was a British renunciate, went to the Himalayas, the first Westerner admitted in the Vaishnava order. And Ramana Maharshi said of him, he was a rare combination of Bhakti and Jnana, which meant that he was someone who had, I loved him because he was someone who I could relate to as a British man, and he was like both. He had both. And he once said, I'll leave with this, I love this. He said to Dilip was struggling also, because Dilip was intellectual too. He said, you cannot know if you do not love, and you cannot love if you do not know. He said, that's a paradox, but if you solve that, you'll go very far in yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Sri Aurobindo even speaks in this language that the biggest problem of our psychology, human psychology, is this discrepancy between heart and mind. We kind of cannot put them together. We do not follow them both. So the truth with the mind, with this structure, which is kind of impersonal, which is more applicable to all, and that love, which is much more intimate. He addresses this topic throughout, through all his writings, through human cycle, you will find. When he speaks about Germans, yes, the state order, the perfect order, everybody is free, harmonized, and all that. But they will miss that intimate love from individual, from the heart of man. That intimate element will be missing, and the whole this global and perfect structure will crumble down. So here you see, this is and we are not even mentioning the power of will, the karma yoga, yes, which has to join the party of the heart and mind. Can you imagine? We are totally composed. Our will, our mind, and our heart are doing the same work. There is nothing for us what we cannot achieve if we are composed. Yukta, that is the name for the composed. Yukta, united. We are united. All the parts are united around the divine. And only divine can unite these three parts. This is another secret. Yeah? We cannot unite it by some idea or some kind of religion or some kind of dogma.
With the psychic being, Sri Aurobindo calls it the Chaitya Purusha, but I don't find that term elsewhere. If you look up Chaitya, you Google on Chaitya, Chitya, you
Yeah,
get
it was later. It
an
was later.
aspect of Buddhist architecture. It's not relating to this.
It was later used in Bhakti movement
Uh-huh.
when Kabir was there, when Mirabai, Chaitya started to be used. But
Okay.
Yes, but not earlier. You're right. Yes, correct.
But
I also
in,
correct that.
you know, I love what you say about Sri Aurobindo changing his yoga when the mother came and introducing this psychic being. But you know, the physical proximity of the psychic being to the heart center, and they're both very much related to the heart, but they're also quite different.
Oh, definitely.
And the psychic being, I understand, it's more of a guide to the will of God as manifested in the individual. You know, that's one's own personal guide to what to do in life as one tunes into it. That may be a insufficient, inadequate description of it, but that's a major role. You know, just quietly, silently guiding us if our heart and mind are quiet enough to hear it.
The fundamental difference why he shifted to the psychic, because he describes this, by the way, himself, on himself, and you can find this explanation that he actually achieved a lot in spiritual sense. But then when he tried to bring this down to the physical, there was a gap. He couldn't reach to the physical. With all this luminous knowledge from above, the physical is not reached. So the bridge was needed, and the psychic is the bridge. And that's why he speaks about this all the time. In Savitri, he calls the mother, when Savitri arrives, the golden bridge. Now, but now, finally, yes, we can do this. When I thought about God, nature disappeared. When I thought about nature, God disappeared. But now you are here. You, the golden bridge, the psychic presence. And that psychic presence makes the connection of the spiritual to the physical possible. So, and this is something amazing. In one letter, he describes through some disciple, I think it was Amritada, he describes why they are both, Mother and Sri Aurobindo. He says, my influence comes from above over the mental and vital being, spiritual influence, and Mother's from the psychic, from the heart, over the vital and physical being. That's why they are two together.
Yes, I don't know. Do we have any time left? You've inspired one
Yes,
more
yeah,
thought.
please go ahead. Go ahead. This is an
Okay,
important
so
issue.
I have chewed Vladimir's ear about this, but I'll say it again. I just read this morning one of the great, I won't say the name, integral yoga speakers. I read a 50-page article, and he said, oh, once the psychic being came in, all the other stuff was thrown out. This is in the 1920s, right? So if you read Basis of Yoga, was collected in the late 1930s, and Sri Aurobindo very, very clearly talks about jnana, bhakti, and karma yoga. He clearly is talking about, he's not saying, we don't need silence anymore. Forget about the self. Who cares? Just go to the psychic being. I know, but I've heard many speakers. I just looked it up. I just looked up Chaitya. I went to another famous speaker who said, oh yeah, that's like, we don't need that anymore. It's like, this is not true. So if you all think you're going to cheat, I don't need the psychic. I just like going to the heart. Not going to work.
By the way, moreover, just to emphasize, to kind of strengthen your thought, in 40s already, Sri Aurobindo rewrites the Life Divine. Look at those passages where, and it will be exactly on this topic, that
Yeah.
psychic itself is not enough.
And the
There has to be.
writer, I won't say, went through the triple transformation and did not mention the word Atman, Jivatman, self once. That it was all about the psychic being and the overmind. That's it. So I'm sorry. I
Well,
apologize. My
there are
vital,
many.
my vital ego here.
Right, but there are many writers and thinkers nowadays and practitioners who use terms very, how to say, subjectively, let us say that way, because it appeals to their mind better. That's the mental preference. Again, the same story. The mind chooses the path which is the most applicable for that person. But in that Life Divine chapter, one has to look into it. It's amazing. Sri Aurobindo says that the psychic, being too long close to human beings and to the issues here in this embodied state, accommodates certain kind of behavior that it may err. Can you imagine? Can make mistakes, preferences for some kind of, pity or some kind of mercy or some kind of, and we know it, we know it, we feel it. So it requires the support of the spiritual, independent from any manifestation. It needs the support of the truth as such, and then it will be able to be the most efficient. So they are both needed. Mother and Sri Aurobindo both are needed. Yeah.
Vladimir, what are we doing here in this hour? It's been a beautiful hour. And it seems like I went from my practice into coming into a stillness of the group, really experiencing the other rhythms. Is this satsang a form of bhakti yoga? Is it karma yoga? Is it jnana yoga? Or is it all three? We're all together. I mean, I was in a group yesterday where Yoga Vastishtha says the four gatekeepers to liberation, and one of them is satsang. And so it seems like I'm floating in all three yogas in this group, whereas alone, I was simply in my own bhakti yoga. So thank you to everybody for being here tonight. I know I don't know most of you, so.
Yeah, bhakti yoga is wonderful. So choose one path, choose what is coming to you, to your mind, what is preference for now, and just that will be fine. I think we can't do otherwise. None of us can. Yeah. We will anyhow fall into our groove. We try to be integral. We try to compose. We try to connect mind, heart, and will into one and see the oneness of all of them. And transcendental will help us to remove all the preferences of the vital, preferences of the mental, preferences of the physical. We need that silence. We need that transcendental being. By the way, even more Sri Aurobindo in the letters started to speak that liberation is so fundamental and so needed for achieving that willpower. Yes? To decide what to do in this yoga. If without that liberation, any progress becomes very difficult. So the first step is liberation. Separation of Purusha from Prakriti. Well, all right, thank you everyone. And yes, we already over time. I will close with mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. In these mantras, interesting, may all be happy, may all see only beautiful things. Nobody should partake of suffering. When they say all, this is the key word. If all are happy, that means the divine is realized. There are no enemies here. We all require to realize the divine. Great. Okay. See you then next time. Namaste.